When you meet someone new and feel that spark, that undeniable excitement, it's natural to want to lean in. You want to spend more time with them, get to know them, hear from them, and share parts of your day. And while that enthusiasm is beautiful, what often happens beneath the surface is something more dangerous. Without even realizing it, you start giving away your energy before the other person has truly earned that access to you. Overinvesting too early is one of the most common and subtle ways people unintentionally diminish their value. The danger doesn't lie in showing interest or being kind. It lies in the imbalance that gets created when one person gives too much too soon. And it's not just about texting more or making more effort. It's about emotional pacing. You might begin rearranging your life around them. When they suggest plans, you drop everything to be there. When they take hours or even days to reply, you still respond within seconds. When they express a need, you're already there to meet it, even though they've made no real investment in you yet. Now here's where the real shift happens. In the early stages of connection, people are always observing, consciously or unconsciously, how someone treats themselves. They're watching whether you respect your own time, your own standards, your own priorities. And when you overinvest, when you become overly available, it signals something you may not intend, that you don't believe your time and energy are valuable enough to be protected, that you're willing to prioritize someone else before they've even shown that they're deserving of that space in your life. You may think that being fully available shows that you care or that you're emotionally open, but for the other person, especially if they haven't built that same level of connection with you yet, it creates a feeling of imbalance. They feel your presence more than they've earned. They receive your effort without having to give anything meaningful in return. And when people receive too much before they've invested, they don't feel grateful, they feel pressure. That pressure comes from a sense of guilt, from a sense of emotional debt. It's the feeling of being handed something you didn't ask for, and now not knowing how to reciprocate. That pressure doesn't create connection, it creates distance, because instead of being excited to earn your affection, they begin to question whether they even want it. And when someone starts to question whether they want something they're already getting for free, their interest starts to drop. This is especially true when it comes to availability. When you're constantly accessible, when your phone lights up the moment they message, when you say yes to every plan, when you stop pursuing your own life to merge with theirs, they stop feeling like they're part of something special. Instead, they feel like you're waiting, and no one is attracted to the energy of waiting. People are drawn to momentum, to someone who is already fulfilled, already moving forward in life with purpose. When someone feels like your entire day hinges on whether or not they call, it makes your life seem small. Even if you're kind, attractive, and thoughtful, that dynamic kills the mystery, the magnetism, the sense of challenge that healthy relationships thrive on. What's especially tricky is that overinvesting often stems from a good place. You're excited, you want to be kind, you believe in leading with love and generosity. That's not wrong. But generosity without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. It's not about playing hard to get, it's about being discerning with your time and energy. You are not supposed to give your best self to someone who hasn't shown they deserve it yet. Not because you're being guarded or manipulative, but because you respect yourself too much to gamble your heart with someone who's still deciding whether to show up. There's a difference between openness and overextension. Being open means you're emotionally available, willing to explore something meaningful, and present when the moment calls for it. Overextension is when you're pouring into a connection before the foundation is strong enough to hold it. It's sending good morning texts every day before you've even had a proper conversation. It's thinking about future plans with someone who hasn't even committed to the next weekend. It's investing your emotional bandwidth in someone who hasn't made space for you in their life yet. Another layer of overinvestment is tied to how you talk to someone. Maybe you start oversharing in hopes that they'll open up too. Or you reveal deep parts of yourself early on, thinking that emotional vulnerability will speed up the bonding process. But emotional intimacy isn't about fast-tracking connection. It's about mutual exchange. It has to be a dance, not a one-person monologue. When you open your soul while they're still giving surface-level replies, you're not creating connection. You're offering up emotional gold in return for pennies. That imbalance doesn't just lower your value in their eyes, it also makes you feel depleted and confused when the other person doesn't respond with the same depth. What's crucial to remember is that relationships thrive on balance, on reciprocity, on a gradual build of trust and interest. Overinvesting breaks that rhythm. It robs the relationship of its natural pace. Think about it like a fire. If you dump all your wood into the flame too early, the fire will flare up fast, but it will also burn out just as quickly. The most lasting fires are built slowly, carefully, with attention to airflow and timing. That's how attraction works. When you offer too much too soon, the other person doesn't get the chance to crave you, to miss you, to earn your affection. And craving, missing, and earning, these are all essential ingredients of lasting attraction. Sometimes overinvesting is also a symptom of fear. Fear of losing them, fear that if you don't keep giving, they'll walk away. But anyone who walks away because you didn't overextend yourself was never meant to stay in the first place. When you lead with fear, you're no longer choosing someone, you're chasing them, and that's never the energy you want to bring into a connection. You don't need to chase, you don't need to convince. The right person won't be impressed by how much you give too soon. They'll be drawn to the strength of your self-worth and your ability to let things unfold naturally. The truth is, your value doesn't come from how quickly you show up for someone else. It comes from how deeply you show up for yourself first. The more you live a full, vibrant, independent life, the more magnetic you become. People respect what you protect. They value what you value. And when you value yourself enough to pace your emotional investment, you don't just raise your standards, you raise the energy of every room you walk into. There's something deeply human about wanting to feel reassured. We all want to feel chosen, seen, and loved. But there's a line that gets crossed when reassurance turns into dependence, when validation becomes not just a comfort but a need. And that's where things start to unravel in relationships. Not because the desire to feel secure is wrong, but because when you start relying on someone else to constantly confirm your worth, it shifts the entire dynamic between you. Imagine this, you're dating someone, and in the beginning everything feels new and exciting. The texts come frequently, the energy is playful and warm, and you feel like you're being seen. But soon there's a gap, a message not replied to right away, a plan that gets delayed, or a tone in a conversation that feels slightly off. Suddenly your thoughts start spinning. Are they losing interest? Did I say something wrong? Are they texting someone else? That spiral begins, and the only thing that feels like it can stop it is a message from them saying, "I'm still into you," or "You're the one I want." And that's where the need for validation creeps in. Not as a gentle reassurance, but as a survival strategy. You start searching for proof, for signs, for anything to soothe the fear that you're not enough. Maybe you start texting more often than you normally would, just to get a reply. Maybe you read into every emoji, every delay, every word they say. Maybe you ask things like, "Do you still like me?" or "Are we okay?" on a loop, hoping that one more affirmation will finally make the anxiety stop. But it doesn't. It never really does. Because what you're seeking isn't just a response from them, you're trying to fill a gap within yourself. And here's the hard truth. No amount of external validation can fill the space that self-trust is meant to occupy. When someone feels like they are constantly responsible for your emotional state, it doesn't draw them closer, it exhausts them. It makes them feel more like a caretaker than a partner. And while compassion is a beautiful part of any relationship, attraction doesn't thrive under pressure, it thrives in freedom. Now, this isn't about pretending to be invulnerable. It's not about faking confidence or hiding your emotions. It's about understanding where your sense of security comes from. When you're calm, your confidence, your sense of peace is always tied to how someone else is acting or what they're saying. You hand over your emotional power to them. They become the thermostat for how you feel on any given day. If they're warm, you're okay. If they're cold, you spiral. And when that happens, you're no longer grounded in your own energy. You become reactive. Every word they say starts to matter more than it should. Every silence feels like a threat. Every moment without confirmation feels like a warning sign, and that reaction, however subtle, can create a tension they feel, even if you never say a word. It's the unspoken energy of neediness, and it makes people pull away, not because they don't care, but because they sense that the relationship is starting to cost them their emotional space. People are attracted to confidence, but not the loud, boastful kind. True confidence is quiet, it's steady. It's the ability to sit in uncertainty without trying to control it. It's being okay with not knowing exactly where something is headed because you trust yourself enough to handle whatever happens. That kind of emotional security is magnetic because it doesn't pressure, it doesn't chase, and it doesn't collapse at the first sign of discomfort. When you need someone to validate you constantly, you put them in an impossible position because no matter how many times they say the right thing, it will never be enough. You'll always need it again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe later tonight, maybe after their tone changes slightly in a message. You train them to feel like they're walking on eggshells, always trying to keep you okay, and eventually they stop feeling excited about the connection and start feeling drained by it. On the flip side, when you can sit with that discomfort, when you can notice your insecurity without acting on it, you regain your power. You start responding instead of reacting. You take a breath instead of sending the panic text. You pause before asking the question that's really just a cry for reassurance, and in that space, something shifts. You start realizing that their silence doesn't mean you're not enough. Their delay doesn't mean you're being replaced. Their mood isn't your responsibility to decode. It's in that moment that you start to build true emotional resilience. The kind that says, "I want to feel loved, but I won't abandon myself to chase that feeling." The kind that says, "I can be vulnerable without making someone else responsible for fixing my fear." That's strength. That's maturity. And that's the kind of presence that makes someone feel safe with you, because they know they're connecting with a whole, grounded person, not someone constantly looking to them for stability. We live in a world that trains us to constantly seek validation, from social media likes to relationship attention. But the most powerful thing you can do is to turn that attention inward. Ask yourself what you're really looking for when you ask, "Are we okay?" or "Do you still like me?"
Most of the time, you're not just looking for the answer, you're looking for relief, and that relief can only come from within. When you make peace with uncertainty, when you can hold space for your own fears without collapsing under them, you become unstoppable. You stop needing someone to constantly reassure you, and you start showing up from a place of true connection, not fear, not insecurity, not desperation. You become someone who chooses love instead of chasing it, someone who can enjoy the connection without depending on it to feel okay, and that energy, that's what people remember, that's what people are drawn to. Because it's rare, it's powerful, and it creates a space where love isn't built on constant reassurance, but
There's a quiet moment in every connection when someone shows you who they really are, not with a grand gesture or a big mistake, but with something small. Maybe it's a dismissive comment that leaves you feeling disrespected. Maybe it's plans being cancelled again, this time with no real apology. Maybe it's the way they disappear for days and come back like nothing happened. And in that moment you feel it in your gut, that tiny nudge that says, "This doesn't feel right." But instead of drawing a boundary, you let it slide. You tell yourself, maybe they're just busy, or I don't want to come off as dramatic, or it's not that big of a deal. And just like that, you begin to tolerate behavior that chips away at your self-respect. Tolerating disrespect doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like being overly understanding. Sometimes it looks like giving someone chance after chance while they give you the bare minimum. And it often comes from a place of hope. From the belief that if you're just patient enough, kind enough, easygoing enough, they'll eventually rise to the level you're quietly hoping for. But here's the truth. Every time you let disrespect slide, you're teaching them how to treat you. You're telling them, this is okay with me, even when it's not. People don't learn through our words. They learn through our boundaries. They learn through our actions. You can say you value honesty, effort, or consistency, but if you continue to show up for someone who gives you none of those things, they'll believe your standards are flexible. And once someone knows your standards can bend, they will test how far they can bend them. The problem is that when you tolerate poor behavior, it doesn't just affect how the other person sees you, it affects how you see you. Every time you excuse something that hurt you, you chip away at your own sense of worth. You start questioning whether you're asking for too much. You begin to shrink. You overthink your reactions. You try to become easier to love by lowering the very boundaries that were meant to protect your peace. Let's be clear, boundaries are not ultimatums, they're not threats, they're not about control. They are simply a reflection of how much you value yourself. When you have a boundary, you're not trying to change someone else. You're choosing the standard for how you will participate in a relationship. You're saying, this is what I will and will not accept. If you can't meet that, I'll remove myself. That's not rejection, that's self-respect. When you tolerate disrespect, especially early on, it sets the tone for everything that follows. Think about it. If someone shows up late, again and again, and you always wait without saying anything, what motivation do they have to ever be on time? If someone gives you mixed signals, hot and cold attention, and you continue to respond eagerly every time, what reason do they have to change? The behavior you allow is the behavior you receive, and often the reason we tolerate it isn't because we don't see it, it's because we're afraid. Afraid that if we speak up, they'll leave. Afraid that we'll lose something before it even becomes something. Afraid of being alone. But let me ask you this, is it better to be alone or to be with someone who slowly erodes your sense of self? When you stay in situations where you're being disrespected, you train yourself to be okay with less. You normalize behavior that should never feel normal. And the longer you stay, the more you begin to believe that this is just what relationships are, that no one is perfect, that all connections are messy, that maybe you're just being too sensitive. But deep down, you know the difference between human imperfection and emotional neglect. One is forgivable, the other is a pattern. It's not just about them canceling plans or forgetting important details. It's about how those things make you feel consistently. If you always feel like you're not a priority, if you always feel like you're chasing them, if you always feel like your voice is too much or your needs are inconvenient, that's not a relationship, that's a compromise of your soul. Sometimes we justify disrespect by focusing on potential. We fall in love with what someone could be, and we stay hoping they'll eventually become that version. But potential doesn't equal consistency. Hope doesn't equal behavior. What someone says they want to do matters far less than what they actually do. Pay attention to the actions, the follow-through, the patterns. That's where the truth lives. It takes strength to walk away from someone who gives you just enough to stay, but never enough to feel secure. It takes self-awareness to say, I deserve better, not just when things fall apart, but while they're still functioning on a surface level. And it takes courage to choose yourself, not in theory, but in practice, to say no, to say this doesn't work for me, to let go, even when it's painful, because the pain of staying quiet is louder than the fear of being alone. When you hold your boundaries, you're not being difficult, you're being clear. You're creating space for someone who actually wants to rise to meet you. Someone who respects your time, your energy, your heart, but they can't show up if you're still entertaining someone who doesn't. Every time you settle, you close the door on something better. Not because that better thing doesn't exist, but because you've made yourself unavailable to receive it. Tolerating disrespect is often disguised as being chill or easygoing, but let's call it what it is: self-abandonment. You weren't born to water yourself down so someone else can feel more comfortable. You weren't born to be a version of yourself that fits into someone else's limited capacity for love. The right person doesn't ask you to shrink. They don't test your boundaries. They honor them, not because you demand it, but because they can feel that you honor them too. This isn't about walking around with walls up. It's about walking through life with standards that are non-negotiable. Standards built not on fear or ego, but on the quiet, grounded knowledge that your heart is worth protecting, that your energy is sacred, that your time is valuable, and that anyone who gets close to you is being given a gift, not because you're better than them, but because you finally learned to treat yourself like someone worth showing up for. And when you treat yourself that way, people notice. The right people step up, the wrong ones fall away. And that's not loss, it's alignment. Because respect isn't just something you ask for, it's something you live. There's something incredibly attractive about a person who's already in motion, someone who wakes up with purpose, who has things they're excited about, who has their own life, their own schedule, their own path. That kind of energy draws people in. It creates curiosity. It makes someone want to learn more about you, to be part of your world, not because you're chasing them or trying to impress them, but because you're already whole without them. And yet when we begin to like someone, it's incredibly easy to start shifting our focus away from our own lives, and slowly, almost without noticing, start orbiting around theirs. It starts small. You skip one gym session to spend the evening texting. You push a project to the side to make yourself available if they call. You delay catching up with friends because you're hoping for a last-minute plan with them, and over time, the structure of your life that once made you feel confident, grounded, and alive starts to weaken. Your routines become more fluid, your priorities shift, and before you know it, your sense of fulfillment becomes tied to your connection with one person. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to spend time with someone. That's part of any healthy relationship. But what becomes dangerous is when your identity, your joy, your sense of self-worth start depending on that connection, when your days feel empty unless they text, when your weekend plans feel pointless if they're not part of them, when the things you used to love, whether it's reading, traveling, creating, learning, begin to fade, because now they just don't feel as exciting without that person involved. The truth is, abandoning your own life for someone else doesn't make them love you more. It makes you lose the very energy that made them interested in you to begin with. Think about it. What attracted them in the first place? Maybe it was your independence, your confidence, the fact that you had your own rhythm, your own interests, your own goals. That self-possession is magnetic. It says, I'm good with or without you. And paradoxically, that's what makes people want to be around you more. When you start giving up those things, not only does the dynamic shift, but your internal world begins to change. You start relying on this person for emotional highs. When they're engaged, you're happy. When they're distant, you spiral. And suddenly your well-being is no longer in your own hands. You become reactive to their moods, their schedule, their level of effort. That's not love, that's emotional dependency. And it's not just about what the other person sees, it's about what you feel. When you're no longer doing the things that light you up, you start to feel dull. Your confidence drops, your joy fades. You might not even realize why, because everything feels fine on the surface. But underneath, you've disconnected from the parts of you that give you energy. And here's the thing, if you don't feed your own life, you will try to feed off someone else's. And that never ends well, because eventually, the other person starts to feel the pressure. They begin to sense that your happiness is now their responsibility. And that weight, over time, can push even the most well-meaning person away. It's easy to lose yourself in someone, especially when the connection is new, when everything feels exciting and full of possibility. But the strongest relationships are not built on one person dissolving into the other. They're built on two people who are already whole, already living meaningful lives, choosing to share space, not because they need to, but because they want to. If you've ever found yourself in that place where you look around and realize your world has quietly become centered on one person, you're not alone. It happens to people with the best intentions, people who are kind, generous, thoughtful. But kindness shouldn't come at the cost of your identity. Love shouldn't require you to shrink. There's immense beauty in missing someone while still choosing to pursue your own growth, in caring deeply while still keeping your priorities in check. That's not being detached. It's being emotionally mature. It's saying, you matter to me, but I won't abandon myself in the process of loving you. That balance is rare, and because it's rare, it stands out. It makes people feel safe, respected, and inspired, not smothered, not needed, but chosen. You don't have to be constantly available to be loved. You don't have to sacrifice your passions to prove your commitment. In fact, the more alive you are in your own world, the more valuable your presence becomes in someone else's. Because now, when you show up, it's not out of need, it's a gift. It's an extension of a full life, not a replacement for one. Sometimes we confuse effort with sacrifice. We think that giving more, doing more, or centering someone completely is how we show love. But love isn't about abandoning your life to be in someone else's. It's about building a connection that supports both lives, where each person feels free,
energized, and empowered, and that doesn't happen when you let go of everything that once made you feel alive. When someone sees that you still show up for yourself, that you still protect your routines, invest in your goals, and prioritize your own joy, they learn how to show up for you too. You teach them, without saying a word, that you value yourself, that your time is sacred, that your presence is not to be taken for granted, and that more than anything earns their respect. People don't fall in love with someone who's constantly available. They fall in love with someone who is rooted, someone who brings something to the table that can't be found just anywhere. When you're grounded in your own life, when you refuse to disappear into someone else's, you carry an energy that says, I'm not here to be consumed, I'm here to be chosen, fully and freely, and that's the kind of connection that lasts. Not because you gave up your world for someone, but because you welcomed them into it, without ever letting it disappear. At the heart of it all, your value isn't something you beg someone to recognize, it's something you embody, protect, and live every single day. When you stop over-investing in people who haven't earned your energy, when you stop chasing constant validation to feel secure, when you refuse to tolerate disrespect disguised as normal behavior, and when you stay rooted in your own life no matter how deep a connection feels, you reclaim your power. And that kind of power doesn't just attract the right person, it naturally filters out the ones who were never capable of meeting you at your level. You don't need to perform for love. You don't need to shrink, chase, or prove. You just need to honor yourself so consistently that the right person has no choice but to respect, value, and rise to meet you.